have some flexibility, so if it's just if I can call for emergency, I have to go, but usually I can go off and come here, and then I need to go back for the shutdown.
And that's all.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. If you have your mushaf or your translation, you can turn to Surah Baqarah, Ayat number 101. Inshallah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولما جاءهم رسول من عند الله مصدق لما معهم نبذ فريق من الذين أوتوا الكتاب كتاب الله وراء ظهورهم وكأنهم لا يعلمون واتبعوا ما تتلو الشياطين على ملك سليمان وما كفروا سليمان ولكن الشياطين كفروا يعلمون الناس السحر وما أنزل على الملكين ببابل هاروت وماروت وما يعلمان من أحد حتى يقولا إنا نحن فتنة فلا تكفر فيتعلمون منهما ما يفرقون به بين المرء وزوجه. I will stop here and we'll do the rest later. So whoever was not present at the last session, the topic of these few ayat it's sihr. Although that's not the only topic, but that is pretty much so the theme which it centers around. So we discussed this and we kind of delved into the issue somewhat. What is sihr? What is its reality? Why is it mentioned? And why is it important? So we'll do the same thing and maybe add some more to it for those who were not present. So the first, or the beginning of the two ayat that I recited, the beginning, it says, وَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ عِنْدِ النَّاسِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, speaking primarily about the Yahud of Al-Madinatul Munawwara, so the Jews who were living present amongst the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that when there came a messenger from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who affirmed all that which they already had, مُصَدِّقٌ لِمَا مَعَهُمْ, so that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not a newcomer, but rather he just brought something that may have slightly been different in certain aspects, but it's pretty much so the same message. Well, in reality, in terms of i'tiqad and belief, no prophet has ever said anything different. Okay, every prophet has always said one and the same things in regards to Allah Azza wa Jal, and in regards to nubuwwah and prophethood, and in regards to the akhirah, the three main themes of our theology and i'tiqad. So there is no difference there. That never changes amongst the Anbiya and the prophets and the Rusul. So that's one thing. Of course, as we know, unfortunately, the people who were given utul kitaba min qablikum, as they are often called, the people who have been given the book before you, meaning, of course, the Jews and the Christians, they are the two traditions, well, the two more well-known traditions, monotheistic traditions. And I would say even beyond that, it's not just monotheism, because there are other religions in the world, Zoroastrianism, for instance, in the early days, that did believe in one God. And I think I mentioned this a long time ago, primitive societies also are found to always have a concept or a belief of one God, to the surprise of many. Only surprises those who are arrogant, right? It's funny to know that historically civilizations are the ones that create shirk and polytheism. But left on their own, quote-unquote, primitive societies, normally you'll find that there are people who do believe in a creator and in the oneness of that creator and of God, Allah Azza wa Jal. Okay, so monotheism per se is not unique to the Judeo-Christian tradition, neither to the Muslims. But there's something that is mentioned here that we should pay attention to. What makes it unique is not so much the concept of believing in one God, but what makes these religions unique is the concept of following a book, more specifically, not just a book, but following prophets. That is actually the real separation between these traditions and other religions or traditions out there in the world is not so much monotheism, but it is more the idea of following revelation. And revelation is, it's necessary to understand the nature of revelation. You first have to understand the relation or the concept of nubuwwah or prophethood. Does it make sense? So when they say these are the monotheistic traditions, I don't know if we should agree with that per se. There are other monotheistic traditions out there. So what makes Judaism, Christianity, and Islam different? You can say Abrahamic, possibly one thing, millatu Ibrahim, millatu abikum Ibrahim, alayhi salam, the Quran says itself. It is a pattern or a way of life, a standard that was set by Ibrahim alayhi salam. We could say that's Quranic, we can agree with that to some degree, right? The Abrahamic traditions, the Semitic traditions, you could even claim that. So much for anti-Semitism, right? Because the Prophet ﷺ, being Arab, is also a Semite, and the Arabic is a Semitic language, and he is also from the progeny of Ibrahim alayhi salam. But to take it deeper, we're talking about the idea of following prophets and anbiya and of revelation, divine inspiration, or in this case, when we say Kitab Allah, we're talking about not just divine inspiration, but literally divine revelation in form of word, kalam, and of a book. Tangible, human language that is used as the medium to convey to us the speech of Allah Azza wa Jalla. So that's why they're also called what? Ahlul Kitab. Right? Make sense? Okay. So the people that came before us, unfortunately, historically, for whatever reason or the other, this is a long saga as well, which is all there in Surah Baqarah, actually, and in other surah, of course, other chapters of the Quran, but for whatever reason, they had strayed from the original content and message of those books. In fact, we're not just going to say they strayed from the content itself was lost. The content itself was lost. يُحَرِّفُونَ الْكَلَامِ, as the Quran itself says, that they had changed the word of Allah Azza wa Jal. And so historically we also find that this is the criticism of many of the people of the Bible, for instance, that it's just not simply a reliable text. Okay, we cannot look at it as a reliable text, that this is word for word exactly what was given to Musa alayhi salam, as an example, or to Isa alayhi salam. So even in terms of the text itself, we cannot rely on what they say. So the idea of musaddiq, that the Prophet ﷺ was just affirming, tasdiq, the word musaddiq comes from tasdiq, which is also what we define iman as, that it is tasdiq fil qalb. It is when you affirm in your heart the wahdaniyah, the oneness of Allah, and the risala, the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So tasdiq literally means to affirm or confirm something. So what does it mean in this case that the Prophet would confirm and affirm all that? Ima ma'ahum, what is with them. Literally, ima ma'ahum, what they have, what they possess. So things, we don't say, to be fair, although we say historically they're not completely reliable, we also will say, as the Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, la nusaddiqu wa la nukadhib. We neither affirm it completely nor deny it. In other words, we're not also saying that it's completely what?
Made up.
There you go. It's not completely unreliable. There may be things in the Bible, for instance. There may be things that we find in the Old Testament and New Testament could very well be what Musa alayhi salam had or what Isa alayhi salam had. But because there is no way we can know for sure, as the Prophet said, we will say, neither do we affirm nor do we deny. So we're not just going to say that everything they have is complete and utter nonsense. Rather, there could be something there. So the meaning of musaddiqan lima ma'ahum, okay, that whatever is there of truth, whatever may remain with them of the Book of Allah that has not been tampered with or lost or anything like of that nature, then the Prophet ﷺ is there to confirm it. Which is interesting because it's also kind of the way that we should approach people when we talk to them should be similar in the sense that we don't want to look like the new kid on the block, but rather the similarities should be brought out as much as the differences. Right? You can't do just like, for instance, the approach cannot be just how much different we are and never mention the fact that this is actually a continuous chain that happened since the time of Adam alayhi salam, of prophethood and of books and so forth and so on. And we are not the new kid on the block, but rather we are just the completion of it. And so the similarities are brought out for that purpose. Just like it is brought out here for this purpose. That he came to these people, bringing what they had already had. You understand what مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا مَعَهُمْ, to bring something that they themselves are already, it's already there. They have this information. They're acclimated to what he says. They haven't. It's not something new that they've never heard before. The wahdaniyah, the oneness of Allah, and even the sharia to a certain degree. It may have changed in some aspects, but in most of the very basic parts of the sharia, the 5 pillars of Islam, there is no difference between us and the people that came before us. For instance, salah is also there amongst the people who came before us. Zakat is also there. Sawm is also there. Even Hajj. Okay, and that can be explained in detail in another place. So all that is there. Nothing new, right? So even in terms of practice, nothing new. Okay, but that's not the real point of these ayat that we're bringing up today. But just to kind of bring into our picture what's going on here. So you have a tradition that exists. They are there. They've been there for thousands of years. Now a man comes with something very similar and in reality the same as all the other prophets to verify what they had and to clarify also. وَمُحَيْمِنَ عَلَيْهِ is in another ayat. To clarify, in other words, where they have went wrong. But however, that's important because when they saw him, they knew and they recognized all of this. They were a tradition of learning, as even today in Western culture, they always try to paint the Judaic tradition as a tradition of what? Learning. Of study. So when they got this messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam in their midst, as the Quran says, يَعْرِفُونَهُ كَمَا يَعْرِفُونَ أَبْنَاءَهُم. So they knew him clearly, they recognized him, in other words. يَعْرِفُونَ, they recognized him as clearly as they would recognize their own children. So in other words, just as you would never have any doubt about who your child is when you see them. And they had no doubt also in Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam when they saw him of who he was. However, نَبَذَ فَرِيقٌ مِّنَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ, that there was a group of them who just threw away whatever they had of the Book of Allah. They threw it away in to such an extent, وَرَاءَ ظُهُورِهِمْ, meaning behind their backs, which is a strong expression because if you put something behind your back, you're not paying any attention to it at all. Correct? If you put something behind your back, you can't even see it. Right? So that's why the expression throwing it literally, نَبَذَ فَرِيقٌ مِّنْ أُوتُوا, right? نَبَذَ فَرِيقٌ مِّنَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ. So they took the Book of Allah and what they knew, and they did what? They threw it behind their back. وَرَاءَ ظُهُورِهِمْ, as if they're not paying any attention whatsoever. And instead, or as it says, كَأَنَّهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ, as if they had no knowledge of this whatsoever. So you throw out the evidence completely. You don't even want to see it. As if you have no, if you weren't even privy to the fact, right? When you just throw it behind your back, what does it mean? It's as if you didn't even know about it to begin with. You hide it, okay? So then it says, وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ. But instead what they did is they followed that which the shayateen had taught them during the reign of Sulaiman alayhi salam. Okay. Now we mentioned this in the last meeting we had, that even today there's a Talmudic tradition amongst the Jews of magic, which is called Kabbalah. And you can buy books regarding it in Barnes and Nobles, for instance. It's there. It's not a hidden thing or some kind of conspiracy theory. It's quite out in the open, right? And its subject matter is magic. I shouldn't be telling you to do that, but if you were ever so interested, you could look yourself and see that, Abdul Hakim is not crazy. And it's also studied by a lot of famous people. Madonna, for instance, is a self-proclaimed student of Kabbalah. Ajib. So here, what is Allah saying? That some of them, what they did is, instead of following guidance from Allah and the Book of Allah, what did they follow? They followed all that was taught to them of the shayateen during the reign of Sulaiman. وَمَا كَفَرُوا سُلَيْمَانُ وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that it was not Sulaiman alayhi salam that disbelieved, but rather it was the shayateen who disbelieved. And that statement is made because in the biblical tradition, and we mentioned this last time, there is this habit that they have of disparaging the prophets, of disparaging them by accusing them of committing major sins of a very heinous type, right? Of the worst type of kaba'ir you can imagine, like, as an example, accusing Lut alayhi salam of committing incest, right? Accusing Dawood alayhi salam of falling in love with his best friend's wife and sending him off to die in a battle so he can marry him, right? He can marry her, and so like all of these things are there. They're all there in the Old Testament. Part of that too was the accusation that Sulaiman alayhi salam had idols brought to the temple, and then he had fallen to idolatry and other things and vices because of this tampering with magic and the shayateen and so forth and so on. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exonerates him and says that it has nothing to do with Sulaiman alayhi salam, but rather it was the shayateen who taught these people what they knew, and Sulaiman alayhi salam had nothing to do with it. So part of the long-winded discussion that you find in the classical exegesis or tafsir of the Quran has to do with different hadith that explain what had really happened, which in essence it just boils down to that when Sulaiman alayhi salam had the shayateen with him, as we know was a fact, he used them, okay? That the shayateen tricked people by trying to convince them that Sulaiman alayhi salam had this power because of magic. And so the shayateen had written some things, magic formulas and so forth and so on, and put it in a type of a parchment and put it underneath the throne of Sulaiman alayhi salam, so that when he died, they brought it out and he said, see, this is what he was doing the whole time. Okay, as a trick. This is what he was doing the whole time. This is part of the subject, because this is what we're going to add, which I didn't talk about last time, which is important to understand the nature of the supernatural. And I'm using that word on purpose. And why it's important, because there is also connected to the story of Babel, as is mentioned here, right? The city in which all people were said to, in the Old Testament version, spoken one language. Okay? And then all of a sudden their languages became different and people split and became separated. But in that also, there is, many of the ulama, Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala and others have said that there was a time when people would use magic to claim prophethood. Okay? To trick people and to claim that they themselves are prophets and men of God. And because of that, this is one explanation, which I didn't mention last time. This is one explanation of why the angels came and taught يُعَلِّمُونَ النَّاسَ السِّحْرَ, that they taught people what sihr is, so that they can distinguish between what is truly miraculous and truly from God and what is simply just magic. Okay? And why is that important? Because that is related to also certain issues about aqidah, and it's actually furthermore related to the things that will happen in the last days. So in Sahih Muslim and other books, you find that the Prophet ﷺ said before the coming of Dajjal, there will be about 50 or not more people who will claim prophethood. And another hadith related by Ubadah ibn Samit radiyallahu ta'ala anhu in the Mustadrak of Imam Hakim, one of the things that the Prophet ﷺ told, or one of the things that he told us ﷺ would be a sign of the end of this ummah, was that the Yasar al-Shayateen al-Mulajjama, which means that the shayateen who were tied up and cast in the ocean, as some explain it, during the time of Sulaiman alayhi salam, the very strong shayateen, Okay, they were tied up, and mulajjamat, it means like literally they were tied down. Okay, iljam, or it is literally to put like a saddle on something. So they were tied up and put under control and cast away. But when they will be let out and allowed to roam amongst people, this is another sign of the end of the ummah. You understand the connection? So there's a strong connection between the appearance of magic and the supernatural, and again we'll come back to this word to explain the whole thing, and the last days. And there's a strong connection with that and the claims of people who are false prophets. Okay, strong connection between the two, which is interesting. So let's get into a little bit of this whole word supernatural. Because, okay, seeing that this is the condition of the world we live in, which is now called the postmodern world. But the postmodern world is still coming out of the shadow of the modern world. So everyone knows what happened in the modern world. Western Europe goes through its second industrial revolution, and its military and colonial strength is almost undisputed for a long time. And in that time, they spread, obviously, their ideology throughout the world as well. And that ideology, modernism, becomes a time, like if you know the movements in the Western world, there's a reaction to this also, because the modern world becomes completely materialistic. Completely. In other words, all the answers to every phenomena in the universe is materialistic. To the point that atheism itself, Darwinism, also creates a problem for many people in the Western world. You get the picture, right? In that world, there are reactions to that, like the Romantic movement in the Western Europe, and then, you know, from that existentialism and all this other thing. They thought that it was becoming too much. People were becoming too materialistic. People were becoming too much like the machines that they were making, and everything became so mundane, and everything became like Sherlock Holmes, right? Logic to Sherlock Holmes is always what? The very tangible and explainable material causes, but never the supernatural. And that's what's important. What does the word supernatural even mean? Natural would mean that there's always a tangible cause that you see happen and work all the time, that you count on working, like gravity or whatever else it may be. Supernatural is when something occurs outside of that. That's what the word literally means. Supernatural, it's literally mean what? Something that occurs out of that normative, the natural causes that we observe. Now the interesting thing is the literal translation of mu'jiza, or what most of us would call miracles, is khariqun lil-'ada. Literally supernatural. Khariqun lil-'ada means it goes against the normative, right? What we see and observe, the natural causes every day. It happens and it's supernatural. Now, of course, there's a further explanation of mu'jiza, that it is especially attributed to someone who claims prophethood. It's important to kind of tie all this in, all right? So the claim of the one who says they are a messenger of Allah, when something happens that is supernatural at their hands, this is what we call a what? Mu'jiza. The word itself comes from i'jaz. Ajiza or ajiza ya'jizu. Literally means to become ajiz. You know ajiz? Incapable, unable. So i'jaz is the opposite. It's when you make or you incapacitate something or someone. You get it? So mu'jiza is that thing which incapacitates, or, right, literally, in this case, incapacitate, like just, they're not able to do something. And what are we talking about here? Prophets come, they deliver the message, people reject them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows the supernatural to occur at their hands so that the people who reject them have no other option but to say that this man must be speaking the truth, because such a thing could not occur unless it was from Allah directly. Okay? So literally mu'jiza is like the last straw. After this, they have no argument, they have no reason to complain, they have no reason to reject. It is only their stubbornness or whatever other reason that they had before that now they say, no, we will not believe this person. Does it make sense? Okay. Now how is this connected? Because the word supernatural in the modern world. Right? So the modern world is now ending to a certain extent. The technology is there. But we are now approaching, or we're already in what's called the postmodern world. And if you pay attention, there is a trend now in the postmodern world for people to become quote unquote more spiritual. Okay, to give people, they give more credence now to the supernatural. They don't always explain everything, unlike the modern world, where even the Muslims, unfortunately, were affected by this, where, you know, I don't give names, but certain Muslim thinkers in the turn of the 20th century began to explain away the Quran and many things as none of this is supernatural. There's some scientific explanation for these miracles and for jinn. Jinn are just germs, for instance, as some actually tried to go and interpret it. Okay, that happened in the Muslim world. Right? So now we're finding a change. People are saying, well, no, there's more to reality than what meets the eye. Okay? Why is that important? Because they're now acknowledging that there is something more than what meets the eye. However, this happens to coincide with the end of the Ummah and the end of times, where we will find that the supernatural happens a lot, but it won't be of the good kind. Of what kind will it be? Of the Dajjalic and deceptive kind, of the satanic, okay, of that which takes people away from Allah. So that's why it's very necessary, and this is related to this ayat, because some of the ulama say that in the whole gist of it, when, for instance, when the malaika came and taught them a form of magic and said to them, إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ فِتْنَةٌ, we are just a test for you. فَلَا تَكْفُرْ, so don't disbelieve. Every time you leave the guidance of Allah for something else, then this is called what? نَبَذَ فَرِيقٌ, then you're throwing the book of Allah behind your back, and then you're taking something which is other than what you've been given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're taking that. You understand? That's what the lesson of the ayah is, right? What did they do to the book of Allah and what they had knowledge of from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Nabada, they threw it. Wara dhuhurihim, they threw it behind their back and ignored it completely. And what did they do instead? وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينَ, that they followed whatever was taught to them by the shayateen. So in exchange for the book of Allah, they instead followed the knowledge that was given to them by the shayateen.
So just to clarify, that the book of Allah, it was their Torah, not because the Quran wasn't completed that anyway. So
Yeah. Does it make sense so far? Okay, so that's why it's even necessary to categorize the supernatural. And so the ulama have categorized it according to the Quran and the Sunnah. Basically, we have the mu'jizat, which all of you know or should know. The mu'jizat, as I said, are those things, supernatural acts that occur at the hand of a prophet. Okay? Then you have the karamat. The karamat are also established in the Quran, and we cannot deny them either because they are mentioned in many, many instances. Maryam radiyallahu ta'ala anha, when Zakaria كلما دخل عليها زكريا محراب ودخل عليها زكريا المحراب وجد عندها رزقا. So Surah Ali Imran talks about this miracle or supernatural occurrence, that every time Zakaria alayhi salam came to see Maryam radiyallahu anha, in mihrab here is literally an enclosed room. There's no way in or out. It's completely sealed off, except for whatever door entrance he was using. Just to let you know that she wasn't going anywhere. Right? She wasn't going to the supermarket or something like that. Okay? But every time he went into that room to feed her, he would find وَجَدَ عِنْدَهَا رِزْقًا. She already had food and drink. And some of the tafsir and exegesis tells us that the food and drink was even out of season. So this is well before refrigerators or anything like that existed, right? So not only did she have food and drink, which is not being provided from any outside source, also was out of season. So when he saw this, he asked her, أَنَّا لَكِ هَذَا, how did you get this? And what did she say? قَالَتْ وَمِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ. This is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then this is obviously something that is what? Karama. Because she's not a prophet. And also the people of the cave and so forth and so on. There's many Quranic incidents where we find that people who are not prophets experience these kinds of things. And they are called karama simply because they, in actuality, it's from karam. You know karam? They are a way of honoring the prophet. Why? Because part of the definition of a karama is a true follower, a person is muttabi', who is following the prophet. whatever prophet that is of their time, and of course with us is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Those people who are truly following his sunnah, right, they are given this karama as, first of all, the real reality behind it is to show the truthfulness of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That those who truly follow him are truly beloved and accepted by God. And the proof is why. Because here we find that these things happen to them. Things of miraculous nature, so forth and so on, or the supernatural, as we said before. Also, it is a proof of that person's veracity and truthfulness. In other words, this is a way of Allah telling us that this person is a true follower of the Prophet ﷺ, so therefore you should follow them as well. You understand the point? They are a true follower of the Prophet ﷺ, so therefore if they are instructing you, then you should also follow them. That's a karama. There is a type of miracle that may happen to you and I, the regular Muslims, maybe not perfect followers of Muhammad ﷺ, but we are trying, and this is called al-i'ana. And this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assists a regular believer, a regular Muslim, if you will, awam, the common Muslim, the everyday Muslim. It could happen in, for instance, it may have happened to you in life, you never know. Could be that you were trying to make Hajj or Umrah, and maybe you were trying to do some good fi sabilillah, so forth and so on, and you found that something that's not normal happened to you. We may have, may not, many of us may have, and if that is the case, right, then this is called al-i'ana. Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assists also the regular believer, maybe they're not so pious, but they are still believers. But what does he do? This usually, like I mentioned certain things, usually the assistance comes at times when that person is striving to do something good. Striving to do something fi sabilillah. So it is a way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, like, shabash. Right? You're doing well and what you're doing is good and I will help you. If you have a sincere intention and you want to do good, then I will help you and here's how I will, and you will find that something happens. That does happen. Now the other things that happen are the type that happen at the hands of people who are the enemies of God. And that's where the distinction is important. So you have istidraj. Istidraj is dokna, deception. This happens at the hands of people who are flagrant and open sinners, or even enemies of God. But yet you will find them doing what? Miraculous things. Why does Allah allow this to happen? So that people can become more confused, and if they choose to follow the wrong path, and they begin to believe that they're on the right path. سَنَسْتَدْرِجُهُمْ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. It's like the English equivalent of giving them enough rope to hang themselves. So that happens as well. Then you also even have another category that the ulama explain, which is al-ihana, which is where people who claim prophethood will try to perform a miracle, but they will be unable to, and instead Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will disgrace them. So if you know the incidents of Musaylima, who was a false prophet that appeared when the Prophet ﷺ was still alive, okay, that there was many times when he was asked to perform a miracle, a mu'jiza, for the same reason, that this is the only way now that we can know whether you're telling us the truth or not. So he tried to do things like, for instance, a person who was blind in one eye, they brought him to him and they asked him to cure him, and instead he made the other eye blind. They had a well that was empty, or was low, and they asked him, can you, because the Prophet ﷺ, one of the miracles, for instance, that water came out of his fingers, which is recorded by many people and happened. So they asked him, can you do something similar to this? So he tried to spit in the well to let it fill up, and instead it dried out completely. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not allow a claimant of prophethood to perform miracles in front of people. Which means that, okay, what we just said, what about the people in the last days who claim to be prophets and this connection with magic? But that's the whole point. Magic is not the same as a what? A miracle. It's a deception, it's tadlis, right? So you have these, what do you call them? The faith healers and all these people, the holy rollers. Have you ever seen these people playing with poisonous snakes and getting bitten, and they don't, nothing happens to them because of the love of Jesus and all that, right? Right? So plenty of people will do things like that, and And all of that could just be a form of sihr, or it could be istidraj, but there's a fine difference here, because the question may come that why would Dajjal be able to give, or why will Allah Ta'ala allow him to be given such strong miracles, to the extent that we are told that he will bring the dead to life, he will control the rain and the crops, he will have 2 angels with him that people will be able to see. One, when he says, am I not your Lord, am I not your Rabb, am I not your God? One will say you're a liar, no one will hear that angel. The other one will say in response to the angel that yes, you're right, that he's a liar. Everyone will hear that, so that they will assume that the response is what? Yes, this man is God. So forth. So why would Allah Ta'ala do that? Whereas we just said that people who claim prophethood, like in the case of Musaylama, they will not be allowed to perform miracles. They will always be disgraced. Al-ihana, ihanat. You don't know the ihana, right? Literally, they will be disgraced by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They will not. Some of the ulama have made this distinction, because claiming prophethood is not as easy to distinguish who is truthful and who is not. Because it's not like saying you're God, right? You're saying that God speaks to me. And how would we really know who does and who does not speak to God? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not allow someone saying that to perform a miracle, because it takes a little bit more than just, you have to actually think, okay, maybe, maybe not, let's see. You understand? So it's easier to deceive people when claiming prophethood. Whereas if a man claims to be God, it should be so obvious to people, right? That if, in other words, to be blunt, if you are dumb enough to believe that this human being who was born of a woman and a baby and a child and had their diapers changed and all that good stuff, and eat kana yakulana ta'am, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about Maryam anha and Isa alayhi salam, they used to eat food. All of these things that are so obvious that this is a human being, there's no way a human being can be God. But if you're still dumb enough, again, to be blunt and no offense, if you're still dumb enough to believe that this man could be God, then go ahead, away with you. You understand? Away with you. If you're that dumb still, then fine. Whatever they do, we'll allow you to fall for all of it. And we'll allow him to fall for it too. Meaning that they will be able to do these things. So you get the point? So, but before that, there will be a reoccurrence of these things. Meaning that the supernatural will again become in vogue. People begin to become believers, so to speak. Yeah.
How do we categorize healing? Like when people recite verses of the Quran, people who are sick and are healed supernaturally.
Yes.
Is that a different type of category? Or?
Yeah, that's not magic. That is just simply, and now I was going to mention that too. So you go back to Surah An-Naml, right? And you find the story of Sulaiman alayhi salam. Again, there's a relationship with all of this, and how when he asked for the throne of Bilqis, radiyallahu ta'ala anha, so قال إفريت من الجن. So Ifrit is the highest and strongest category of jinn. Okay, their powers exceed that of other jinn. So the Ifrit, what did he say? أنا آتيك به قبل أن تقوم من مقامك. That I will bring it back to you before you're able to stand up from where you're sitting right now. وإني عليه لقوي أمين. And I'm the man for the job. I can do it. Let me do this. You can trust me. You understand? That's what it's like. I'm just saying it, you know. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, juxtaposes that with what? قال, that a person, من عنده علم من الكتاب, a person who had a knowledge. Ilmun literally here is nakira, which is, another part of the Arabic, part of Nahu and Arabic grammar. Nakira is a general noun. Right, like a car, a flower, so forth and so on. So literally had a particular type of knowledge, if you will, of what? Min al-kitab, of the book of Allah. What is the indication there? It's juxtaposed with the power of the jinn. The jinn were able to do certain things within their power, and this person was able to do something with the knowledge that they had from the book of Allah. Okay? Get my point? They were able to do something through what? Man indahu ilmun min al-kitab. They had a knowledge that they knew of the book of Allah.
A special book.
The book of Allah. Al-kitab here as refers to the book of Allah. Now, anytime Al-Kitab is mentioned, you have to understand that all revelation is obviously from one source, which is Allah's Kalam. It is revealed to different prophets in different times, but it's only one source. So you would take it, the book of Allah, and according to whatever prophet we're speaking about at that time, you would assume that it is that particular book.
Torah.
Right? So that, in that book, for instance, he had knowledge, which is the same knowledge, as I said before, that is given to every prophet, although it may be changed at times in the sense that certain names of Allah, okay, may be revealed that were not revealed from before. Oh, istathalta, as the Prophet himself said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said there are certain names that you have kept for yourself in your knowledge that we don't know even now. If you think that there's only 99, that's not the point of the hadith at all. Okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's names are like him, they are unlimited. So those names are revealed to us that have some direct relation to us and have some fa'idah and benefit to us. And this is, wallahu a'lam, what is meant here by he had a knowledge of the book of Allah. He had the knowledge of certain names.
Ismi Azam or something.
Right, exactly. And with that knowledge, he was able to do what? He said to him, أَنَا آتِيكَ بِهِ قَبْلَ أَنْ يَرْتَدَّ إِلَيْكَ طَرْفُكَ. I can bring it to you before even the blink of an eye. So take the two and compare them, the amount of time that they're talking about here. There's a lot more strength and power in one than the other. I can bring it to you before you stand up. And the other one says, I can bring it to you before you can even blink your eye. So in other words, the knowledge that he had of these things, Allah's names, Allah's book, this is Quranic healing. This is not magic, this is reality. It's Allah's kalam. It is Allah's name. And through Allah's kalam and Allah's name, you can do much more, as the ayah is trying to teach us here, than what? Than any other supernatural means you have out there, including magic. Because part of magic, as we said as a definition, is amalun tuqurriba fihi ila shaitan. Certain things that people do to get closer to the shaitan, bima'unata minhu, to get assistance from them. So there's certain things that jinn can do that we can't. Right? So a person, in order for those things to happen, they do things to get close to those shayateen. That's why, as we mentioned, magic has a lot of these things that involve filth and khabatha and blasphemy and different things that they do so that the shayateen come closer to that person and then do them favors and so forth and so on. But what is Allah telling us? That basically the book of Allah, that's not magic, that is a literal reality. You're connecting yourself with the divine, with Allah's names, with the ayat of the book of Allah. And those things, of course, obviously, are much more powerful because even the shayateen and their magic is all from who? Allah. Okay? So, therefore, if you understand all of it in this way, then it's not, in any way related. In some way it is because it's supernatural, at least it appears that way to us. It's not the normal means, right? It's khariqun al-'ada. It's not the normal procedure that you would use. But in terms of its relation to sihr, it has no relationship in terms of definition. It's not sihr.
So magic always has a negative connotation.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Although what's just interesting, because, I was going to bring that up today. This comes in a discussion too of also knowledge and what kinds of knowledge can we say are good and bad, and even the concept of good and bad, like what is hasan and qabih, as the ulama used to define it in terms of ethics and morality, good and bad. So the ulama have said that really, and some have even mentioned that knowledge in itself is hasan. Knowledge is a good thing, no matter what kind of knowledge it is. So what makes sihr bad?
How do you practice it?
Right. So why would they teach? That's part of because you asked this, why would they teach them then something that is not good for them? To be aware of it is one explanation. Other is also a test. So let's go back to the concept of morality for a second to understand this. So something can be hasan fi dhatihi, meaning in and of itself it's good, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test us. Right? And say, no. Is that possible? Right. Why is that possible? Well, again, they go even further, because when you say something good or bad, there's only three reasons that you could say it's good or bad. One is that something is hasan, something is good, because it gives you pleasure. bluntly, put it, very bluntly, or it's qabih, it's bad because it gives you pain. So that which causes pleasure and that which gives pain becomes our good and bad. Right? So even some would claim that an intelligent person is one who maximizes pleasure and minimizes pain. Would that be a true statement? Without guidance from Allah, yes. I mean, if you took religion out of it, would that be a true statement? Maximize pleasure, minimize pain. That's a smart person, right? Who wants to suffer? Okay? So that's one way. And this is the ulama, we're talking about this thousands of years ago. So that's one way of looking at morality. Good is something that gives you pleasure. Bad is something that causes you pain. Another way of looking at it is something that meets your gharad, or in Urdu gharaz. So that which is good is that which helps you achieve your goals. That which is bad is that which what? Takes you away from your goals. And then the third category they said is that which the aqibah, meaning the end result of your actions. And we're taking it even further to mean the end result of your actions where? In the akhirah. Now, keep that in mind. As far as the first two categories are concerned, nobody has any difference of opinion that those things are something that we can rationally conclude. All right? It causes me pleasure, it gives me pain, or this helps me, or this doesn't help me. Even in big ways. If you look at atheists now and say, why would murder be wrong? Because if you were just to look at it from a completely rational point of view without any ghalal, without any type of purpose, you can't really conclude it's wrong. But why would they say it's wrong? Because society can't function. It doesn't meet our purpose and goals as a society to live together as human beings. If a murder is allowed, then we cannot function. So it's not, you see the morality, how it's not like they're being like soft-hearted and saying, oh, because we care so much about people, right? And we love people so much that's why we think murder. No, it's more of, okay, if we allow murder, then society will not be able to function. So it's the second category, meaning it doesn't meet our goals and our ends that if we allow murder to occur. But when we look at Sharia, we're taking something else into consideration, which inshallah we'll get to that ayah soon. We'll try and explain this. So what does Allah say about Maisa and Khamr, gambling and wine? وَفِيهِمَا وَفِيهِمَا نَفْعٌ وَإِثْمَهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا. Okay, that in both of them there is benefit. Okay, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say there? There is some benefit in it. If you're looking at these other two categories, maximizing pleasure, minimizing pain, or meeting your goal, who wouldn't want to win $1 million overnight without ever working for it? Free money everybody wants, right? Does it meet your goal? Sure. Wonderful. Why work after that, right? And even khamr, like my aunt told me, they're not Muslim, right? And, a little bit of wine, if you control it, it's very good for the heart, which is, it's true, right? So she says, I don't know why is the big deal? Why is it, why do you guys say it's haram, right? So what does Allah say after that? وَإِثْمَهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا. That the sin of these two things is greater than the benefit. So what is the point? Not here, but where? In the afterlife. Because that's the third category. Who's going to Jannah? Who is going to Jahannam? Who will Allah accept? Who will Allah not accept? Can any of us rationalize that? No. You see what I'm saying? So can Allah then take something that is good in and of itself? وَفِيهِمَا نَفْعٌ. Both of them, they have benefit. There's benefit to these things. Can he now have the prerogative to say, no, there's itham in it too? So because of the itham, you can't do it. What's the answer? Yes. Okay? So that's the first answer. Just like when people try to explain, like, why don't we eat pork? And people come up with all these ridiculous reasons, like, oh, scientifically, a pig is not clean and it's not good for your health. They all claim that it's the healthiest red meat. I'm serious. I say, well, pork right? It's not true. Actually, it's goat, believe it or not. Goat as a red meat is actually the healthiest. But they'll say things like that, or even someone is once saying, well, we'll advance our science to the point that we'll be able to get rid of all of the things, the diseases that the pig carries and blah, blah, blah. They have an explanation for everything from that point of view, right? So it's the real answer to the reason why khanzir is haram. Ta'abbudan, meaning this is Allah's prerogative, is a test. If I rationally conclude that life is a test, is it irrational to say that if it is a test, then the Creator can, what? Test us as He pleases. Is that irrational? I'm putting you through a test. So if one wants to test the love and the dedication of someone, what will I do? I might tell them to do things that make no sense at times, right? I just want to see, are you really dedicated? Are you really in love? Or are you just talking?
Make it more interesting.
Right. Layla Majnoon. However, that discussion goes very deep because some ulama say that although that is true, but there is never any, Allah's commandments are never derived of any fa'idah. So we shouldn't misunderstand it to mean that just because Allah is testing us doesn't mean that there is some benefit for us. There is a benefit for us. But we may not always see that benefit where? Here. Okay? But you get the point. So maybe magic, because we talked about this last time we met, so now, that's why even according to the fuqaha, the hukam of magic is different because magic has different levels. One I just mentioned, this is from the Lisan al-Arab, which is an authoritative Arabic dictionary, that one is amalun tuquriba fihi ila shaitan. There are certain things that people do to get close to shaitan, right? Then there's other things that people do, what's called al-ukhtha, which is, as I explained last time, in the times of Jahiliyyah, the Arab, some of the women used to take what's called an amulet in order to make them bewitch or their husband or a man they're interested in, you understand, so that he would never look at another woman or you understand what I'm trying? The harmless type of magic. Nowadays you have that is in vogue again. So if you study about Wicca is what they call what? White magic. And if you ask them, well, what kind of things do you do? Oh, it's so harmless. We make love amulets. Right? We make these like love potions or whatever. It's just, if someone's interested in somebody else or like this, you want to make sure they never look at another person again, we'll give you a little amulet or something or do something to that person so that they're bewitched, enthralled, right? So this is also something that the Arabs in the time of Jahiliyyah that was in vogue. It was called ukhta. So sometimes the ladies would get these things done so that again, like their husband would never look at another woman or whatever it is, right? What appears to be harmless. But for us, it's not harmless in the sense that it's still what? You're still putting someone out of their senses. So that's why another definition of this, ukhda allati ta'khudhu al-ayn, that it bewitches you. Ta'khudhu al-ayn literally means that it takes away your sight to the point that the person sees things which are not really there, and they assume that they are there. Okay? You got it? It bewitches them, if you will. So that's still not good, even if it's for a harmless purpose, like I want this person to fall in love with me. So they don't really like you, but now all of a sudden they fall in love with you. Is that a good thing? Not really. Okay, it's not a good thing. You don't do that to people. They're seeing things that are not really there. So either way, whether you use it for a good purpose, it's still bad in that sense. And then there is, and also another definition of magic is كُلُّ مَا لَطَفَ مَأْخَذُهُ وَدَقَّ, anything where it is very hard to detect where it came from, but it affects you. You don't know and you can't see per se. What is the source of this? Why is this happening? Why am I going through this? And why are somebody else is going through this? Yet it's happening, and that would be called a form of magic. Now, based on that, you have some magic that they say is quote-unquote harmless, right? That magic is still haram. However, the practitioner of it would not be called, they would not be punished for it in the sense of certain hadith you've read that, the practitioner of magic should be killed, right? Mm-hmm. That person will not be punished in that way. Why? Because of what they were doing. They were using magic to what? Whatever, love potions and all that other silly stuff. There are other people that use magic to actually hurt and harm people. Okay? Or as the other categories, that they get closer to the shayateen so that they can use certain things and use certain, supernatural acts to do things to people. That is the type of magic where the ulama say that you can kill the practitioner. Why? Because they are using it to hurt people. They're using it to cause people harm to such an extent that it can cause even death at times. Okay? It can get that serious where a person can cause death at times. So a person who does that kind of magic, there is no doubt that that would be the punishment of it. Again, of course, according to many people, that would be very silly and barbaric and so forth. But again, supernatural simply means something that does not occur within the normal realm of the natural causes, which is nothing irrational about that. Because can natural causes be broken, even according to Einstein, theory of relativity? Can they? Yes. So is it irrational to believe in the supernatural? The answer is no. So if it's not irrational and the Quran states it, that means that there's another principle of Aqidah. If something is logically sound, it's rational, it can be concluded that, yeah, that's possible. Mumkin, meaning that the mind can concede to both its existence and non-existence. And then the Quran tells us that it's there, then what is the Aqidah at that point in time? Then that thing is a reality. It's there. It's something that's real. Okay?
You can't prove it in like worldly, like, just like burning the witches, right?
Well, yeah, that's a different, like, you're talking about like from a fiqh perspective, like how do we prove?
Yeah, I mean, something
Right.
happened like this.
Well, like any other had punishment, right? The requirements are either self-confession or witnesses, and the witnesses all have to be reliable.
It really harmed that other person.
Yeah, even then, if you have no direct proof, you can't do anything about it. You can only protect yourself from
Can you
it.
detect it? Are there?
Oh yes, yeah. If that's a question, yes, you can. But it's interesting to note, and okay, I'm going to say this with a grain of salt because obviously we have to follow the law of the land. It is interesting to note that the Sharia only gives certain instances where you can take the law into your own hands, and this is one of them. That if you actually found, like you legitimately found someone doing that to, like, for instance, you or a family member, you can do something about it on your own, and there's no repercussions in Sharia. Here, obviously, you're going to be charged for whatever, and they're going to laugh at you too the whole time, like, okay, right, you did whatever to this person because they were doing magic on you. I said, they're not going to buy that, right? But in terms of Sharia, if you actually did find someone doing it and you took the law into your own hands, there would be no repercussions for you. Whereas in other hudud and other, obviously, if you lie, for instance, if someone accuses someone, qadh is what it's called, the accusation of zina without proof and reliable witnesses, then you will be yourself whipped, right? And you will never, your testimony is never accepted again. So it's a very serious thing, but in this case, there's no repercussions because it's considered such a, it's difficult to defend against something you can't see, correct? Or you may not have any knowledge of, which is another explanation of why they taught these things. Is that if you have no, if it's not even musawwar, if it's not even a concept in your mind, you don't even have a concept of it, how can you protect yourself from it? But at least if you have some rudimentary knowledge of what it is and how it works, then you can do whatever you need to do to protect yourself and others from it. Which is interesting too, because that opens up, again, the same discussion from before. What kind of knowledge can we learn and can we not learn? So, Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari, rahimahullah, very famous theologian and mutakallim of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, he proved to people who opposed him in the beginning that why would you use the terminology, for instance, like the mutakallimun, the theologians did at that time, of the Greek philosophers, for instance, Jawhar and Adal, all these words we use, that's all from Greek philosophy, ultimately. And he said the reason why is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, أَعِدُّ لَهُمْ مَسْتَطَعْتُم مِّن قُوَّةٍ. Prepare for them whatever you can of strength. So this ayah is obviously in relation to the physical aspect of defending Muslims in Islam, but it also relates to the intellectual and every other field. So if you're in a time and a place where this is the trend, this is what's in vogue right now, like philosophy or whatever it may be, in order to defend Islam, it is okay to learn that knowledge and use it against them. You understand? It's no different that, for instance, physically, if you're talking about weaponry, okay, That's the physical part. It's no different than that. Like, so if you don't have a certain weapon and you need to defend yourself, what do? You better get that weapon. Again, we're not, we rely on Allah and we have tawakkul, but Allah is commanding us. In other words, this is the commandment of Allah. A'iddu lahum. As much as you are able, defend yourself. So if they know a martial art, you learn it. If they have a certain, you also defend yourself. Don't just be a sitting duck. But it applies to the intellectual as well. If there's a trend, which is what's happening in his time, the Mu'tazila obviously translated and learned Greek philosophy, and then they started kind of causing problems in the Muslim Ummah and confusing them about certain issues of Aqidah. So what do you have to do? This is the problem. At that time, the Muhaddithun would refute the Mu'tazila, but because they didn't have the same knowledge as they had, everyone, the common person looked at the Muhaddithun like they were kind of like idiots. You know how today too, like they look at movies like, oh, these guys, right? They don't know anything, right?
Is that what Al-Ghazali did?
He did it, yeah, but he came after, so he had the same type of knowledge though, yes. So, but the first few that codified it and wrote it down, for instance, is the Ash'ari Madhab, as they call it, is Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari, rahimahullah ta'ala, amongst others. Imam Maturidi also did it, and there were other ulama too, but those two schools basically survived, meaning their books and their works survived. Imam Maturidi was not reactionary though, it was a little bit different. Whereas Imam Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari, being in Iraq and around the Mu'tazila, it was reactionary, so the methodology is a little different. It's more argumentative, and it's a lot of the dialect, it's all there in his method. But the point he made to these people who originally thought that, well, if the Prophet ﷺ didn't use these words, if the Sahaba didn't use these words and didn't use this language, why are you using it? And he said, because of this. Because when that is in vogue, right, you have to now use that methodology in order to do what? To defend Islam. Not to prove Islam. Islam is already there, but to defend it. Okay. You understand? So the same thing goes here in the sense that there are certain knowledges that having a rudimentary, understanding of it is necessary in order to protect yourself from it, in order to be able to understand it at least, so that when it comes, you know what it is, you know how to deal with it. So every age has its own fitna. Ours is the modern liberal human rights paradigm, if you will. If you look at it, the only attack, very rarely will you see Muslims being attacked from a philosophical point of view, in terms of their aqidah, in terms of theology, which we covered somewhat. أَمْ خُلِقُوا مِنْ غَيْرِ شَيْءٍ أَمْ هُمُ الْخَالِقُونَ. Were they created from nothing, or they themselves are the creator? That's what the Quran states. So even philosophically, the only explanation for the universe around us is either that the universe itself is eternal and self-subsisting, or it has a creator. And there's an argument for that, which is very sound, which is that every single thing in the universe is contingent, right? As we talked about before. And everything that's contingent, it must have a cause. Now, again, an atheist will say, well, the cause has to be material too. Well, you see, that's redundant, and that is what do you call it? My brain is working in many directions. This is a, what's the word for it? The ongoing argument. It's the Tasallusul Arabiya. Oh, it'll come to me in Arabic. So the point is that you can't have a whole set of series of material events that depends on one or the other eternally, going all the way back. There has to be a time when there is something that made it happen that is not part of it. That's how we know that Allah is not part of the material world. If you understand what we mean by Allah, no beginning, no end, and does not depend on anything, He is not part of the material world, and that's why He must exist. That's why He's wajibul wujud. Otherwise, the material world could not exist. So the Quran asks the same question: were they created from nothing, or are they themselves the creators? Okay, so that's rarely do you hear those type of arguments today against Muslims. What is the primary thing that they attack Muslims about today? Sharia, right? True or not? Very rarely will you hear arguments about God's existence or who is Allah, because they know that the Muslims, in fact, there are Christian writers who are now, no kidding, translating Imam Ghazali's works of theology to defend their own tradition, Christianity, that does God exist. They call it the Kalam, the Kalam argument for the existence of God. Okay. And there's literally books written now by non-Muslims of Imam Ghazali's arguments to prove the existence of God from a philosophical point of view. But that's not usually what people will argue with or attack us about. And they will usually argue with and attack us regarding Sharia. Because it's the new fitna of the age. It's not so much this old philosophy of the atheist about the existence of God or not. It is more of what modern liberal, let's say, morality and the idea of human rights. Okay? That the Sharia, to them, of course, seems to be the opposite of that. And then they'll use keywords like barbaric and out of date. Let's see. One guy, I love the way they see it. It just shows you people don't really know what they're talking about from the beginning. Is they want to take us back to the Stone Age, to the 7th century. Well, the Stone Age was in the 7th century. Like, just these simple things like, kind of, imbecile. The Stone Age is not the 7th century. I mean, well, their minds are wired in such a way, that they don't even know what they're saying half the time. But it's all evil. But that's so why I'm saying that it's similar in our time. We need to learn. That's why these other concepts that I talked about, inshallah, we'll get to later when we talk about these hasan and qabih, what is good, what is bad, what is morality. How really do you decide what is, you understand, what is moral and immoral, what is barbaric? Because the same people will not find it barbaric to drop a nuclear bomb on somebody, but it's barbaric to do this or that, or the hudud, the penal punishments in the Sharia. Right? So where is that? Is it arbitrary, or is there a reason for that, and why? Okay, where is your morality tell you that this is barbaric and this isn't barbaric? All of that has to be discussed now by the Muslims as well. All right, and we should prepare ourselves. Prepare yourselves. Right? Arm yourselves for that type of defense. And especially for ourselves and also for our children, because if they go to these schools and amongst their peers without being confident and armed, literally, like just like physically, if you know how to defend yourself, then mashallah. You ever see people who are trained? How do they behave? Confident. They're not scared. So we need to do the same thing intellectually. In fact, there's more of a demand there intellectually, that the Muslims should be confident. They shouldn't be scared by these terms that are thrown out at them. And because that's all they are. They're like what you call plastic words. The plastic word? You throw it out there and it has no real meaning. You just throw it out there so it can fit any agenda that you have. Like a slogan. So if I say you're backwards, okay, define that. What does that mean? I'm backwards. You're barbaric. Okay, define that. What is barbaric? What is barbarism? Right? You're this, you're that. Okay, define it. Tell me, what do you mean by that word? And half the time you'll find the people don't know themselves what they mean by it. They're just throwing out slogans. So, inshallah. Anyhow, we'll stop here. If there's any questions, inshallah.
So the magic is separate than the jinns, right? Jinn is more creature, can be magical or totally separate.
Yeah, no, they are part of the world we live in, but they are part of the more subtle and unseen world that we live in. They're not easily detectable to the human eye. That's why, as a general rule, again, Allah will not inform us about these things unless there is some purpose to it. And He informs us about the existence of jinn because these are things that normally you will not be able to detect.
But in earlier scripture, are these the same as demons, falling angels, or?
Right.
It's totally different concept.
No, it is the same. It's just that they kind of obscure. But to be fair, even some Muslim scholars had believed that Iblis was from the Malaika as well. That's a long discussion. I was reading about that this morning too. We can do it another time. But whether that can happen to the Malaika, it's actually related to this story to Harut and Marut. I explained it somewhat last time. The muhaqqiqun, those who have really done good in terms of researching this issue, would say that the Malaika, the general rule remains the same. لا يعصون ما أمرهم. They don't do things like the story of Harut and Marut. I don't know if you've read it before in Exodus, that the two angels that were tested by Allah because they had condemned the children of Adam alayhi salam for being so sinful. So Allah Ta'ala said, okay, well, I'm going to test you and I'm going to give you desires. So the moment they were sent on earth with desires, they immediately committed zina and murder and all these other things, right? So then he said, okay, well, now you have to be punished. And then they were given an option, be punished in this world or be punished in the akhirah. And they were given the option, they said this world, so they're chained or they're confounded right now in a place near Babel and being punished. That's, you may have seen that before or heard that before. Some ulama reject that outright and say that this story has no basis. It's from the Israeliyat, right? And some ulama say no, but what would be the hikmah behind it? Even some of the ulama may claim, like the Old Testament, that he was an angel, is that malaika are only, they're not like ma'asum in a sense that there's no capacity. If they are the will of qul, if they're intelligent beings, it means they make choices, right? The malaika do obey Allah because they are a part of a realm and a world where it's in front of them, they see it. And they are not tested, as in this story, like mankind is tested with physical desires, right? So therefore, it's very, in other words, that choice, it just becomes natural. Not that it is natural. Do you understand the difference? Because then it'd just be like a robot, right? You just program them and they just work a certain way, right? But rather, because of that situation, that they see the unseen, they don't have the challenge of these desires, so they're always going to choose to. You're not gonna, if you see the cannon in front of you, right, and you know what's gonna happen if you mess up, right? You're not gonna choose deliberately, like, hey, yeah. Once everyone sees the state trooper on the highway, what happens? Everyone hits the brakes, right? And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, ihsan is to do what? And ta'budullah ka'annaka tarahu. Worship Allah as if you see Him, because you're a different person. But for them, so that's a discussion there. But the idea is that, yeah, the other people did know, even again outside of the Judaic Christian tradition. I mean, all ancient peoples and even ancient Europe before they were Christians, everyone talked about spirits and, you know, right. And that's again from the modern world dismissed all that as just nonsense. People just explaining things that they couldn't understand. Now, scientifically, we can have a natural cause for everything, right? We can explain everything by what's observable. And you just dismiss the claims of hundreds of thousands of people that came before you as if they were just all imbeciles. You see that it's actually, I read a book recently, he's not even Muslim, he made a good point about this. It's kind of like he gave an example of a king in Siam, which is the old, from the colonial times. Let's say the king of Thailand. That an Englishman comes to him and explains to him the concept of snow, right? Which he's never seen before. He said, yeah, in our country, water freezes. And sometimes it freezes to the extent, like, like in a lake, that your elephant can walk over it. So what does the king of Siam do? He says, I used to think you were intelligent, now I know you're a fool. Why? Because he's never observed it before. The simple, basic reason is what? I've never seen that happen before, so how is that possible? That's not a good enough reason, where if someone would actually know the nature of water and freezing and all these words you're using, could conclude logically, right? We're talking about something abstract. And so that's very possible. You see what I'm saying? So the idea that people did talk about these things, and also that's explained by the fact that before the Quran was revealed, which is, you go back and you read Surah Al-Jinn and Surah Al-Safat and other ayat of the Quran, you will see that before the Quran is revealed, like in the time of Sulaiman alayhi salam, in the time of these, again, pre-Christian Europe, the activity of humans and jinn there was more prominent. Okay? When the Quran was revealed, those activities were pretty much so kind of like put to an end. So it doesn't happen as much anymore. Not even in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So only very few Sahaba saw those incidents where the Prophet ﷺ talked to jinn, for instance. It didn't happen like every day to the point where everyone was there. Whereas in the old days, you hear about this all the time. Look at the time of Sulaiman, the shayateen were there with them, right? So when the Quran was revealed, the interaction between the human world and the jinn world was reduced to the point that even someone would be maybe fooled to think that they're not even there, right? But interesting enough, like I said, according to some hadith, that stuff will all come back again in the last days. Meaning, again, if you look at the trend, the postmodern world, now people are beginning to accept the supernatural. I made this joke last week when I said I like coffee. I go to coffee shops and say all the baristas, all the girls they're all witches. It's the truth. You see like they're all into that stuff. They practice magic and we're witches. They'll even say we're witches, and so people, that's all coming back now. So don't be surprised if in the coming years, even now, think about it this way: UFOs used to be a subject of mockery. UFOs are now a serious topic in mainstream news. Without being mocked. Without being like, oh, you're just nuts. It's like, no, there's actually, it's a very, very high probability of, so